Every telescope pointed at the sky is watching the same thing right now. An object moving so fast it barely makes sense. 3I/A/TLAS is slicing through our solar system at nearly 58 kilometers per second, and its behavior doesn't match anything in the textbooks. Every 17 minutes, it pulses. Gas, dust, and chemicals are firing off like it's on a timer. That's not how comets usually act, and the scariest part is, its path is frighteningly close to Mars. Some models show that the difference between a near miss and a direct impact is thinner than the line of a razor. NASA's Planetary Defense Office is treating the situation with utmost care, running scenarios and playing out the what-if scenarios. If Atlas were to slam into Mars, the shock wouldn't stop there. The red planet could release debris into space, some of which would eventually cross paths with Earth. So now everyone's asking the same question. Where did this comet come from? And most importantly, what happens if that debris heads towards Earth? Astronomers using the ATLAS telescope in Chile noticed something odd in the data. Atlas is a sky survey built to spot anything that might threaten Earth, so it's always scanning. On July 1st, 2025, it picked up a faint object drifting near Jupiter, about 670 million kilometers from the Sun. At first, it just looked like a tiny dot, hidden in the busy stretch of the galaxy where there are so many stars that most surveys don't even bother. But this time, ATLAS spotted something worth paying attention to. Once the discovery was reported, telescopes around the world jumped on it. Within a single day, the orbit showed something almost no one expected. The path was hyperbolic, which means the object was not bound to the Sun at all. It was flying in from outside our solar system. That made it only the third interstellar object ever confirmed, after Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019. And just like that, this dot of light had a new label, 3I/ATLAS. The crazy part is how fast it was moving. Astronomers calculated its incoming speed at about 58 kilometers per second. Yeah, you heard that right, per second. By the time this video ends, it would have covered enough distance to circle Earth nearly 4 times. And then there was the orbit. Astronomers use something called eccentricity to measure how stretched out an object's path is. For most comets, that number is close to 1. Oumuamua's was just over 1, and Borisov's was a bit over 3, but 3I/ATLAS. Its number was over 6. That number basically screamed that this thing was not from around here. Another surprise showed up in the early images. Unlike Oumuamua, which looked dead and gave off no gas or dust, 3I/ATLAS was clearly active. It had that faint hazy glow around it, called a coma, which happens when a comet starts shedding material. Astronomers even went back through old photos from June and realised it was already doing this way, out past where most comets usually wake up. In other words, it started giving off gas and dust much earlier than anyone thought it would. The angle it came in at was very strange. Most of the time when space objects swing by, they come in at a steep tilt, kind of like cutting across traffic. That's what happened with Oumuamua and Borisov. But this one, it was almost cruising right alongside the planets, tilted back only about 175 degrees. That means it was just a few degrees away from being perfectly lined up with the solar system's flat plane. So instead of looking like a random hit and run, it felt more like it had slipped in and joined the flow. Pretty unusual, right? Size was the last thing that caught attention. At first, some estimates put it as wide as 20 kilometers, which would make it the biggest interstellar object we have seen so far. Later, the Hubble Space Telescope narrowed that down to under 6 kilometers, but even then it was still larger than Oumuamua or Borisov. Bigger, faster, brighter, and active. No wonder scientists were excited. And as soon as word got out, more telescopes jumped in to take a look. Other observatories started checking it out. What were they doing? Basically, just measuring where this thing was compared to the background stars, kind of like marking checkpoints on a map. Astronomers went back to old images and realised the object had already been caught weeks earlier, but no one knew it at the time. The Zwicky Transient Facility found it in shots from June 28th and 29th, literally hours after Atlas had filed the report. Pretty soon, even older data surfaced. ZTF found another set going back to June 14th. The Weizmann Astrophysical Observatory dug up a May 21st observation. In the end, by the time the Minor Planet Center officially announced 3 I/A TLAS on July 2nd, they had 122 logged measurements from 31 different observatories. We're talking more than 60 check-ins a day. It's like the whole astronomy community dropped what they were doing to watch. A telescope in the Canary Islands measured the coma at about 26,000 kilometers across. That is actually larger than Earth. Just a week earlier, another telescope measured it at about half that size, then saw it expand to nearly 19,000 kilometers by early July. The comet's glow was swelling up quickly, almost like watching a balloon inflate right in front of you. Further observations in July and August brought another surprise. The coma was reflecting light in a weird, uncommon way. That caught a lot of attention because it did not behave like normal comets from our solar system. The Atlas system kept an eye on it too, tracking how its brightness changed over time. Astronomers used different filters to look at it in slightly different colours of light, and they kept logging details all through August. At first, the fuzzy glow around it looked really small, but by the end of August, the tail had stretched out much farther, which showed it was growing quickly. Each of those measurements helped scientists understand it better, even if it also raised more questions. More astronomers soon started pointing their equipment at the sky, but the notes they sent in did not always align. Some early observers swore they saw nothing that looked like a comet. One of them was Alan Hale, a well-known name in the comet world. His initial report said the object looked bare with no tail and no fuzzy glow. That kind of description only added fuel to the idea that maybe this wasn't behaving like a normal comet at all. On the other hand, David Jewett and Jane Liu, two respected comet experts, confirmed the activity using the Nordic Optical Telescope. They said 3 I/A TLAS was clearly active and diffuse. On another mountain, Miguel R. Alarcón and his team at the Teide Observatory used their 2-meter telescope and backed up the same conclusion. Astrophysicist Avi Loeb, who had already stirred debate years earlier with ideas about Oumuamua, came out with a paper suggesting 3 I/A TLAS might not be natural at all. He floated the idea of it being some kind of extraterrestrial spacecraft, pointing to what he thought were odd features like its large size, its early lack of clear chemical signatures, and the way its path was nearly parallel to the solar system's plane. As the months moved on, even bigger ideas came into play. Teams started drafting mission concepts, wondering if a spacecraft could catch it. By this point, people weren't just asking about comets and dust anymore. The question on everyone's mind, could it actually be a probe? So here's where things take a pretty wild turn. A group of scientists started to wonder if 3 I/A TLAS might not be a natural comet at all, but instead some kind of artificial craft, maybe even a probe. The main person behind this idea was Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb. Once he laid out his reasons, the theory stuck with a lot of people because the numbers were, honestly, pretty strange. The first big argument came from its orbit. 3 I/A TLAS was flying on a path that lined up almost perfectly with the flat plane of our solar system, which is called the ecliptic plane. Now, most interstellar objects we've seen come in at random angles, but this one tilted off by only about 5 degrees. That might sound small, but when you run the math, the chance of that happening by accident is like 1 in 500. Some argue this perfect alignment would be really handy if you were trying to study planets, because it lets you get a clear view of their orbits and time your moves just right. But it gets weirder. As the object moved through, it lined up to swing unusually close to Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. Not crash into them close, but close enough that if someone wanted to, they could use the flybys to drop off little gadgets or mini probes. The odds of that kind of timing happening naturally? According to some estimates, about 0.005%. Again, the numbers are so lopsided that I don't blame anyone for raising an eyebrow. And then there's the timing of its closest pass to the sun. The way it lined up, the sun was blocking Earth's view right when it passed. As a result, we couldn't track it properly from here on Earth at the most important moment. Loeb suggested that if this thing really was a craft, that would be the perfect time to hide any kind of maneuver or even to deploy something, since our telescopes wouldn't catch it. Some even tossed around the idea of a reverse solar Oberth maneuver, which is saying it could have used the sun's energy in a special way to slow down and stay in our solar system, instead of just zooming out forever. Also, early numbers suggested 3I/A-T-L-A-S might be as big as 20 kilometers wide. If that were true, that would make it extremely rare compared to smaller interstellar objects. On the other hand, if it were more like a comet, people expected to see lots of gases and chemicals flying off as it heated up near the sun. But those signals weren't as clear as you'd think. That grey area left people asking what it really was. If it wasn't acting like a comet and it seemed too big to be just another rock, then what was it? Even the material looked a little odd. Some reports talked about nickel being there without the usual matching amount of iron. Normally, in space rocks, nickel and iron show up together. If you find one without the other, it starts to look like they were separated on purpose. That's when things start sounding less like nature and more like technology. The object was also reflecting a lot more sunlight than some models said it should. If it wasn't just shiny by chance, one idea was that it might have its own energy source, something powerful like nuclear energy, lighting it up. Its speed also added fuel to the fire. 3I/A-T-L-A-S was moving about 58 kilometers per second relative to the sun. That's blistering fast. With our current rocket tech, there was no way we could catch up to it. Some said that was the whole point. If you're sending a probe into a star system and you don't want anyone there to tamper with it, you make sure it's going so fast that nothing can touch it. The bigger picture behind this theory was that maybe it was here to look around, to scout. Some even stretched the thought further and connected it to the so-called dark forest idea, which basically says that advanced civilizations might hide from each other or strike first to stay safe. When you put all these little things together, you can see why some scientists wanted to treat 3I/A-T-L-A-S as more than just another comet. Perfect orbit, rare planetary flybys, weird material clues, strange timing, and unusual size and speed. None of that proves anything, but it paints a picture that made people stop and say, what if? All those odd details open the door to even bigger questions. If it wasn't just a comet or a probe, could it actually be trying to tell us something? What really caught people's attention was how old this thing is. Scientists say it came from the thick disk of our galaxy, a place full of ancient stars that were born 7 to 10 billion years ago. That means 3I/A-T-L-A-S has been around since almost the dawn of the Milky Way. So when it shows up in our neighbourhood, some ask if that timing's random or if it's more like a message carried across time, finally arriving when we're advanced enough to notice. The whole messenger idea comes up a lot. Scientists usually describe it as a leftover piece from the early galaxy, but others say it could be something sent on purpose long ago. A kind of time capsule. People described it as glowing in green and blue. Now, in symbolic terms, green is tied to growth and new beginnings, while blue is often seen as divine or spiritual. Put those two together, and you get this strange mix of renewal and warning. Some call it a paradox, like it's showing both hope and danger at the same time. Its movement didn't help either. Unlike planets and stars, which follow paths you can set your watch to, 3I/A-T-L-A-S seemed more unpredictable. That made some people feel like it wasn't just a rock, but almost alive. Ancient civilizations used to watch the skies for patterns, and when something broke those patterns, it was always read as a sign. In this case, people saw it as a disruption, a cosmic reminder that change is coming whether we're ready or not. Some even tied its arrival to what's going on here on Earth: political tensions, climate problems, social unrest. The idea is that the sky mirrors human history, and big celestial events often pop up right when things down here are shaky. That belief goes way back. In fact, many religious texts say that lights in the sky were put there as signals and warnings. So to believers, 3I/A-T-L-A-S wasn't just a comet. It was a reminder to watch the times carefully, maybe even a nudge to prepare for something larger, like judgment or renewal. And then there's mysticism. Some pointed to the Zohar, a central book in Kabbalah, which talks about a major celestial event tied to a prophetic revelation. To them, 3I/A-T-L-A-S lined up perfectly with that idea, signalling a shift in consciousness, and maybe even hinting at messianic times. Of course, that wasn't the only interpretation. Different cultures and traditions saw their own meaning in 3I/A-T-L-A-S. For thousands of years, folks have tied strange lights in the sky to bigger meanings, and 3I/ATLAS, with the way it showed up and the glow it gave off, has people wondering if it might fit right into some of the oldest stories we've ever told. Think about the Hopi prophecies. The Hopi are one of the oldest indigenous groups in North America, and their elders passed down stories about something they called the blue star Kachina. According to them, when this star appeared, it would mark a time of what they called Great Purification. Basically, a big turning point for the world, where things would fall apart before they could be made new again. Only the people living in truth and balance would make it through. 3I/ATLAS was said to glow with this cold green-blue light. Some people swore it looked exactly like fire, but in space. Doesn't that sound a lot like what the Hopi were describing? The prophecy even talks about a kind of hidden message, 3 parts in one: intelligence, instinct, infinity. Almost like a reminder that we're supposed to think, trust our gut, and realise we're part of something way bigger than ourselves. Some see 3I/ATLAS as that reminder, not just a rock flying through space, but a cosmic test. Are we paying attention, or are we just asleep at the wheel? But it doesn't stop with the Hopi. People have tied 3I/ATLAS to European and Middle Eastern prophecies too. Nostradamus, for example. He's the French guy from the 1500s who wrote all those cryptic verses that people still argue about today. One of his verses mentioned a great star blazing for 7 days, and a cloud that would make 2 suns appear. Sounds a lot like a comet with a huge glowing coma, right? And he had other lines about fire falling from the sky, or some kind of terror from above. If you go back even further, comets have always carried heavy meaning. Ancient China called them broom stars, sweeping across the sky, often blamed for disasters, or seen as warnings to rulers. Some emperors even kept astrologers on payroll just to watch the sky because they believed a comet could topple a dynasty. Babylonian records say the same thing. Floods, wars, and plagues all seem to line up with strange objects streaking above. Medieval Europe wasn't any different. Chronicles from that time link comets to famines, revolutions, and even the death of kings. When you add it all up, the unusual blue-green light, the faster speed, and the odd path, it's easy to see why people linked 3I/ATLAS to something bigger. To them, it wasn't just a rock in space. It lined up perfectly with those ancient stories of a wandering star that comes by to stir things up. But if people in the past thought one comet could change history, what do we say when 3 of them show up back to back in our own time? It all started back in 2017 when astronomers first spotted Oumuamua. That was the very first confirmed interstellar object we'd ever seen passing through our solar system. Right away, it was weird. It didn't look or act like any comet or asteroid we knew. Then, only 2 years later, in 2019, another one showed up. Borisov. And now, not long after, here comes 3I/ATLAS. 3 strange visitors in less than a decade, after literally billions of years of nothing. I mean, doesn't that sound a little too neat to be a coincidence? Some theorists look at that and say, maybe, just maybe, it's a pattern. Avi Loeb is known for suggesting that Oumuamua wasn't natural at all, but maybe a piece of alien technology. He even came up with something called the Loeb scale. On that scale, both Oumuamua and 3I/ATLAS score at level 4. That's the level where no clear natural explanation fits, and there are just enough odd details to keep the possibility of artificial origins on the table. It doesn't mean alien for sure, but it means worth looking deeper. For starters, the paths these objects take through space. They all travel on hyperbolic trajectories, which means they're not looping around the sun like planets or comets we already know. They're just passing through from far away. With Oumuamua, the strangest thing was how it sped up in a way that couldn't be explained by gravity alone. Usually if a comet does that, it's because of gas or dust shooting off its surface, like little thrusters. But Oumuamua didn't have any visible coma or tail. Loeb suggested maybe it was thin like a solar sail, catching the pressure of sunlight to push it along. 3I/ATLAS, on the other hand, had its own quirks. Its orbit lined up almost perfectly with Earth's, and it passed close to Venus, Mars and Jupiter. Odds so low they felt almost intentional. Add in its surprising size and the fact that it didn't show a clear coma at first, and you can see why some people started asking if it was really just a comet. Of course, more data came in later and showed that 3I/ATLAS is definitely active as a comet. Unlike Oumuamua, it has a coma and a tail, and it started letting out water and other gases even when it was still far from the sun. So on the surface, that makes it seem a lot more natural. But even here, the details are odd. The James Webb Space Telescope studied it and found that the ratio of carbon dioxide to water was unusually high, one of the highest ever seen. That suggested it came from an extremely cold region in another star system. Loeb himself even went beyond the solar sail idea this time. With 3I/ATLAS, he suggested possibilities like a camouflaged craft, or even something powered by a compact energy source, maybe nuclear. He even speculated it could be a living vessel, breathing out carbon dioxide. With speculation running that far, it was only natural that attention turned toward the agencies in charge of the data. People weren't just arguing about what 3I/ATLAS was, they were also pointing fingers at NASA and other space agencies, saying they weren't being straight with the public. And honestly, I get why that idea caught on. The way information was handled felt kind of strange. For example, the James Webb Space Telescope pointed at 3I/ATLAS on August 6, 2025. That alone was a huge deal, because if any telescope could tell us what this thing really was, it would be Webb. But right after those observations, no research paper came out, nothing for the public to see. The raw data wasn't shared either, and officials explained it by saying they had to verify everything first. On paper that makes sense, but for a lot of people, the silence felt suspicious. Some argued that if NASA really had nothing to hide, why not at least release a few basics right away? Instead, they said, the delay looked like censorship. People online began wondering if the images we eventually see can even be trusted. Once that doubt got started, it kept growing. And then you had this odd mix of silence and reassurance. NASA and the European Space Agency kept repeating the same line. It's just a harmless natural object, nothing to worry about. That should have calmed everyone down, but instead, it did the opposite. Some folks claim that history shows whenever officials rush to calm fears, it usually means they're holding back the full story. What really fueled the fire were whispers about behind-the-scenes moves. While the public got tiny updates, rumours said the Pentagon and European Space Command were holding emergency meetings. Some claimed there were talks about pulling old space defence projects off the shelf, maybe even getting ready to build interceptors or probes. Throw in the chance that China could accelerate its space program, and you start to see why this grabbed everyone's attention. Public calm on one hand, quiet mobilization on the other. That split made the cover-up theory look even more believable. You've probably heard about the WOW signal before, and if you haven't, well, I'm about to make it your new obsession. In 1977, a radio astronomer named Jerry Eman was working at the Big Ear Radio Telescope in Ohio. While scanning the skies for unusual signals, he spotted something extraordinary. The signal came from the constellation Sagittarius and was so strong and strange that he wrote "Wow" in red ink on the printout. That one word captured the mystery, and it has fascinated scientists ever since. Now, this signal wasn't just some random blip. It wasn't like picking up some weird static on your old radio. This one, lasting about 72 seconds, was consistent, unlike anything we'd ever heard from any natural source. Because of its strength and direction, the signal got people's attention and made them wonder if it could be evidence of alien intelligence. But it's never been detected again. Not once. Researchers tried to pinpoint the signal's origin, but every time they came up empty. Another case is Tabby's star, discovered in 2009. This star was acting strangely, dimming in ways that astronomers just couldn't explain. It wasn't the usual dimming you'd get from things like planets passing by. This was different. Huge, irregular drops in brightness, sometimes by up to 20%. At first, some folks thought maybe a bunch of comets were hanging around, dusting up the place. Others even speculated that it could be an alien megastructure shutting off the star's light. Either way, this was a star acting like it had a mind of its own, and no one could really figure out what was happening. When you look at 3I/Atlas, it's hard not to think of both of these cases. I mean, Atlas was this mysterious interstellar object that popped into our sky out of nowhere. It wasn't your everyday asteroid or comet. Its weird behaviour sparked alien theories, just like Tabby's star. Both of these objects, in their own way, seem to challenge what we know about how things should behave out there in space. Sure, some argue that natural explanations can cover them, like comets or dust clouds, but doesn't it feel like there's something more at play? I'm not saying we're on the verge of proving aliens exist, but when things like this happen, it does make you wonder. As exciting as the unknown sounds, the more grounded voices had their own take. So let's take a quick look at that. Up to this point, we've seen all kinds of wild claims about what 3I/ATLAS could be. But if you ask most scientists, especially geologists and astrophysicists, the answer is way less flashy. They'll tell you straight up it's just a comet. A weird one, sure, but still a comet. One scientist from NASA, Tom Statler, put it in the simplest way possible. He said, "It looks like a comet." It does comet things. The point is, nothing about it screams spaceship. So what is a comet, really? The basic picture is pretty simple. You've got a solid chunk of ice and rock at the centre, called the nucleus. The closer it gets to the sun, the more heat it makes. That ice turns straight into gas. That gas carries dust with it, and together they form the glowing cloud we call the coma. Add in the tail pointing away from the sun, and you've got the classic comet look. 3I/ATLAS checked every one of those boxes. Remember how the carbon dioxide measurements earlier made people raise eyebrows and whisper about alien tech? Well, here's the thing. When scientists looked closer with the James Webb Space Telescope and SPHEREX, they found it all still fits perfectly with a natural comet. The high carbon dioxide to water ratio isn't proof of anything alien. It just shows 3I/ATLAS probably formed far from its star, or built up a thick crust that traps water better than carbon dioxide. Nothing about it breaks the rules of normal comet behaviour. On top of that, they also found traces of cyanide gas and even nickel vapour. Both of those are common in comets too. The amount of dust flying off matched what they had seen from another interstellar comet, 2I/Borisov, a few years earlier. So the data stacked up fast and it all pointed the same way. Of course, people like Avi Loeb had some questions early on. For example, he pointed out that at first no gases were detected. Scientists answered that by saying the comet was just too far from the sun at the time. The ice wasn't warm enough yet to release those gases. And sure enough, once it moved closer, the gases showed up exactly as expected. Another claim was about the size. Some people said it could be up to 20 kilometers across, which would have been massive. But scientists later explained that it was a mistake, caused by the bright dust cloud making the nucleus look bigger than it really was. High-resolution images from Hubble showed that the true size is probably under a kilometre. That's tiny compared to the original guesses. And while all that talk about cover-ups and secrecy was circling around, the scientists were busy saying something very different. It was a natural comet. NASA came out quickly, saying it behaved exactly the way comets behave. The European Space Agency agreed too. They said every single observation matched up with what you would expect from a natural object that had been out in space for ages. So what about the path it was on? The orbit of 3I/ATLAS is actually tilted about 175 degrees compared to the plane where most planets sit. That means it is coming in almost backwards compared to everything else. To scientists, that tilt was nothing weird. Interstellar objects can come from all kinds of angles. The evidence seems to be overwhelming, but all the signs point to it being natural. And the more data that came in, the stronger that case became. According to the Planetary Defense Office, none of the 3 interstellar objects we have found so far show any credible sign of being anything other than natural bodies. Even though all the evidence so far points to 3I/ATLAS being just a natural object, it's hard not to get caught up in the mystery. That's what makes it so fascinating. It moves fast, it came out of nowhere, and its path is just unusual enough to keep us wondering. The more we look at it, the more it reminds us how much we still don't understand about space, and how many surprises might still be waiting out there. If you enjoyed this video, check out the one on your screen right now.